Level 1, Neophyte. The surgical slab is cold through the thin fabric of your tunic, and the apothecary's tools smell like chemicals sharp enough to sting the back of your throat, and somewhere beyond the hull, the chapter's hymns move through the metal, like the ship itself is offering a prayer on your behalf. You are not a space marine, not yet. You are a collection of biological potential the chapter has decided is worth the investment, and that decision will be tested before it is confirmed. The 19 implants required to remake a human body into something capable of surviving what the Black Templars ask of it take years to see correctly, and in the earliest stages you are simply a boy carrying organs that haven't finished changing him yet. The sword brother assigned to watch you does not teach, he observes. You follow him into a combat deployment when your implants are still stabilizing, carrying ammunition for a battle brother, whose name you are not yet permitted to know, and you watch at close range what a fully made Black Templar does to an enemy line. The gap between what he is and what you currently are is not discouraging, it is clarifying. You understand for the first time exactly what the process is designed to produce, and the understanding sits in your chest like a coal. You do not fail the deployment, you do not distinguish yourself either. You exist at the margin of a war the chapter has been fighting longer than any living institution you have ever encountered, useful mainly in the way that any additional set of eyes is useful, not yet a weapon, not yet a brother. What you lose first is harder to name than a limb. The catalepsy node implant rewires how you sleep, and in the rewiring something specific begins to blur. A face, a smell, a place that was yours before this. The chapter does not acknowledge the loss because the chapter does not have a category for it. The sword brother says 3 words after the engagement ends. They are not praise, they are an assignment. Level 2, Initiate. Power armor worn for the first time does not feel like power. It feels like argument, the servo-assisted movement fighting every instinct your body has about how weight distributes and where resistance lives. And it takes days before the suit stops feeling like something you are wearing and starts feeling like something you are operating. You are formally inducted into a crusade squad now, fighting alongside full battle brothers rather than trailing at the margin of their engagements. And before the first deployment, you stand before the Emperor's Champion's altar and swear the Black Sword Oath. The chaplain witnesses it. He does not look moved. He has heard this oath sworn 10,000 times, and each one mattered, and this one does too. And his stillness is a form of respect you will only understand later. The veteran battle brother in your squad has been fighting this specific crusade for longer than you have been alive. He does not explain his decisions. He makes them and moves, and you learn to watch the gap between what doctrine says and what he actually does when the tactical picture stops matching the briefing. Your first independent flank assignment ends with you attacking into a gap rather than defending one, because the Black Templar's doctrine of forward pressure means that holding ground is done by taking more of it, and you hold. A brother goes down in your direct sight line during the action. The squad reorganizes around the absence before the sound of it finishes reaching you, and you reorganize with them because that is what the structure requires, and the structure gives grief no room to stand. Before the assault, the sword brother speaks the words that the chapter has spoken before every engagement for 10,000 years. The crusade does not end, he says, and it sounds like a promise made on behalf of something larger than any of the men about to walk through the breach. You survive. Afterward, someone places a relic bolt pistol in your hands. No one tells you whose it was. Level 3, Battle Brother. The warp translation registers in your armor's ceramite before any instrument aboard the fleet catches it. A wrongness, brief and total, like reality clearing its throat, and then real space snaps back and the briefing begins. Your implants are fully stable. The black carapace is seated. The armor moves when you think at it now rather than when you instruct it, and the difference is the difference between carrying a weapon and being one. The Castellan commanding your crusade squad has been fighting this specific campaign longer than most of the squad has been alive. He knows the enemy the way a craftsman knows a material that has resisted him for years, not with hatred, but with the precise attention of someone who intends to win eventually regardless of how long eventually takes. The campaign that tests your new status is a hive world, which means corridors instead of open ground, and a corrupted populace instead of a foreign army, and a doctrine designed for forward assault pressing against an environment where every forward step is a potential killbox. You adapt. The Black Templars do not formally teach adaptation, but the Crusade Squad structure means you learn it from men who have already solved this problem on other worlds, and you watch how the Castellan modifies the charge without abandoning it. What you lose is quieter. A battle brother, who has fought alongside you for years, has requested transfer to a different crusade. The chapter permits this. The chapter does not discuss it. He is reassigned, and his absence in the squad's movement patterns is the only place the loss exists officially. The Castellan pulls you aside when the campaign closes. He asks you a question that has no rank-appropriate answer. The question concerns what you believe the chapter is for, underneath the doctrine, underneath the oaths, underneath the specific military objective currently on the Marshal's planning display. You answer honestly because the Castellan's manner makes deception feel structurally impossible. You do not yet know whether honesty was the right tactical choice. Level 4. Sword Brother. The crusade shield in your grip is scored across every surface by a decade of close fighting, and the worn place where your palm meets the handle has no shape that fits anyone else. And you register this the way you register a callus, not with sentiment, but with the knowledge that some things are made by use and cannot be made any other way. You are a sword brother now, elevated by the Castellan's recognition rather than length of service, and the initiates in the squad watch you the way you once watched the veteran who never explained himself. You understand now why he didn't. Explanation implies that what you did was a choice among options. Most of it wasn't. The Marshal is encountered directly for the first time when a boarding action loses its Castellan early and command falls to you. He is in the briefing via Vox only, a voice that carries the weight of someone who has been making these calculations for so long that the calculations have become instinct. He does not second-guess your assumption of command. He simply continues the briefing and expects you to keep up. You hold the line when everything in your training says to drive forward. The enemy has prepared specifically for a zeal-driven charge, and you see it in the positioning, and you hold, and 2 initiates die in the holding who might have survived a faster push. The mission is a success by every measure the chapter applies. The math is correct. You carry the remainder that the math doesn't account for because the chapter has no storage facility for it, and you are the only available location. The Marshal uses a word afterward that translates, roughly, as tempered. In the chapter's internal language, it is not a compliment exactly. It is a designation. It means the fire in you has been worked rather than simply burned, and that you are being watched for what the working has produced. Level 5. Castellan. The recycled air of a fleet that hasn't made port in 3 years smells like metal and repair. The specific sharpness of hull patches welded over damage that was never fully addressed because the campaign didn't permit a stop long enough to address it properly. Command of a crusade squad means the administrative weight arrives alongside the tactical weight, and they are not the same discipline. You manage the oaths, the vow states of brothers who have sworn specific battle pledges that bind their tactical behavior, regardless of your orders, and you learn to plan around conviction the way a river learns to plan around stone. The chaplain embedded with your crusade holds a parallel authority you cannot override. His mandate is spiritual where yours is tactical, and the relationship is productive in the way that 2 load-bearing walls in the same structure are productive. Neither can remove the other without bringing something down. He does not contradict you in front of the squad. You extend the same courtesy. Neither of you is entirely comfortable with the arrangement. The campaign has stalled. The enemy holds a fortified position that conventional assault cannot break at acceptable cost, and you must find the approach that isn't the approach the chapter's doctrine defaults to. You find it. It takes longer than a charge would have taken. It costs less than a charge would have cost. The chaplain marks the victory in the chapter's record without noting how you achieved it, because the chapter's record has categories for outcomes rather than methods. Afterward, you ask the chaplain, quietly, what victory looks like from here forward, what the crusade is moving toward. He looks at you with the patience of a man who has answered this question in many forms over many years. The crusade does not end, he says, and you hear it differently this time. It no longer sounds like a promise. It sounds like an answer to a question about finality that has no other answer available. You carry the brothers the campaign cost without a structure to carry them in. Level 6 Marshal. The first time the full crusade fleet resolves on the tactical display as a single force, dozens of vessels arranged across a system, you understand in your body before you understand in your mind that every one of them moves on your word now. You command an entire Black Templar crusade. The Castellans beneath you are men of your own caliber, some of them older in service, and they follow your authority because the chapter's structure requires it and because your record supports it, and the gap between those 2 reasons is where most of the political complexity of this rank lives. The Emperor's champion is chosen before a major engagement, a battle brother touched by the call of the Black Sword, elevated beyond rank into something that moves where the fighting is thickest, regardless of tactical orders. You plan around him the way you plan around weather. The doctrine accounts for his presence without being able to fully direct it, and you learn that command at this level means incorporating variables that cannot be controlled, only respected. The War Council with allied imperial commanders asks you to navigate a political environment with tools designed for direct problems. A general wants orbital support. An inquisitorial representative wants something that would cost the crusade more than the current campaign is worth. You give the general what you can afford and decline the inquisitor without declining him in any way he can formally record, and afterward your hands feel exactly as clean as they always do after necessary work. A Castellan under your command pursues his sworn vow to its conclusion and dies for it. The vow was legitimate. The tactical orders were sound. You wrote them. The loss is filed correctly in the chapter's records, and the records have already moved to the next objective by the time you finish reading them. The High Marshal's communication arrives before the last enemy position finishes burning. New objective. New Crusade Theater. The campaign ends. The Crusade does not. Level 7, High Marshal. The oldest pieces of the investiture armor are cold in a way that has nothing to do with temperature. A weight that predates the Horus Heresy pressing against your shoulders in the Great Hall of the Eternal Crusader, while every marshal the chapter can recall stands witness, and the hymns move through the flagship's hull the same way they have moved through every hull you have ever stood inside. Every simultaneous crusade across the galaxy operates in some measure on your authority now. You do not know exactly how many there are. The chapter keeps no librarians, no psychic record keepers, and the oral tradition and relic memory that carry the chapter's history are partly illegible even to the institution they belong to. You inherit a lineage with gaps in it, and you do not fill the gaps with invention. The crisis that demands your direct intervention is not military failure, but something the chapter's language does not cleanly cover. A marshal whose zeal has turned inward rather than outward, consuming the structure of his own crusade rather than the enemy's. You act against your own institution without precedent that fully describes what you are doing, and you act correctly, and the correctness is cold comfort in the specific way that only correct decisions you wish you hadn't needed to make are cold comfort. Standing in the judgment chamber afterward, you understand something about the office that was always true, but that no one in a position to tell you would have named before you held it. High Marshals lead until they are spent. The chapter does not call this loss. You decide, in the quiet after the chamber empties, whether you do. Something in the Eternal Crusader's hull, harmonic, structural, old beyond any individual's accounting, sounds in the silence like an answer, arriving before you have finished forming the question. You are now the one responsible for everyone else's answers. You do not know what the sound means. You suspect it has been sounding for 10,000 years regardless of who stood here to hear it. Level 8, the Eternal Crusader. The cold comes through the viewport now instead of through a surgical slab. The cold of open space visible from the Eternal Crusader's observation bay, deep and permanent. And the hymns still move through the hull the way they always have, but now you recognize every voice in them. You have been High Marshal long enough that the boundary between the man and the office has thinned past the point where examining it produces anything useful. There are decisions you make that you could not trace back to a preference. There are campaigns you direct that feel less like choices and more like weather patterns completing themselves. The chapter does not find this alarming, neither, after enough time, do you. A new Neophyte is brought before you for blessing before his first deployment. He smells of the apothecary's tools. He is afraid in the way that fear presents before it has been fully remade, visible in the set of his shoulders, in the slight misalignment of his attention. You see exactly what he is and exactly what the process will do to him, and you offer the blessing without sentiment because sentiment would reduce what you are witnessing to something smaller than it is. This is what the chapter produces, has always produced, will produce long after any individual accounting of it has been spent. The crusade does not end. You think the phrase and realize it no longer belongs to the institution. It belongs to you in the way that a shape belongs to the thing that has held it long enough to become it. The phrase that was a promise spoken before a breach and then an answer with nowhere to go is now simply a description of what you are. You are not leading the crusade. You are the crusade, expressed through a body that will eventually be spent in its service, and that equation holds no grief that you can locate. The Neophyte is assigned. Somewhere on the fleet, a surgical slab waits. The cold will find him. The hymns will move through the hull. Something in him will begin to blur. The ship moves on. It always does.